Hi everyone, you can hear me and hopefully I'll be sufficiently intelligible and comprehensible despite being an academic. Apologies for that, but let's try. So this is a framework for citizen social science. I teach sociology at SMU. Okay, so what I'll do in this presentation, there's three themes that fit together in this framework that I want to pull on. It was present in a class that I taught called the Public Policy Task Force, and it was present in a labor court research project, which some of you might be familiar with. Unfortunately, Stephanie Chalk, who spoke yesterday, isn't in the audience today. Otherwise, she's one of the co-authors of this report. I would have directed your questions to her. Koki was also active on that, and she's also absent, so I can't direct your questions to her either. But one of my former students, Rainer, is sitting up there, so he was part of the task force, so at least he can chip in on the student experience of the Public Policy Task Force. Okay, and there's some trade-offs involved in this, and we'll come back to some of the themes that others have also talked about. So this is, note the total lack of color. Is there a generational gap here? Where's the pink? Where's the infographic? This is what I've got for an infographic. Actually, Amira, who is our student, right? So one thing, shout out to Amira Din. Nick Harrigan and I were faculty. Nick was faculty at SMU. He's now at Macquarie. But Amira, our former student, so she did the graphic because I think we would have left it as just words as it was. But these three things are meant to fit together: scale, publicness, and participation. And the idea is that they reinforce each other. And I'll briefly define these, right? And they are that publicness, using a definition from sociology from Michael Burawoy, which is that public sociology, what does it do? It promotes dialogue among non-academic publics over values and goals not shared. I mean, that's the good stuff, where your values and goals are not shared, therefore you have to talk about it, and you must engage. These are inherently political and social questions, the stuff that most of us are interested in, right? It's participatory. For us, that means involving non-professionals, basically non-professional researchers, and we included undergraduate students in that category, and to involve them in a manner that empowers them to shape the research and use it, okay? With the goal of helping to engender a scientifically literate public, which, you know, obviously should be the goal of a social science education, not least for the students in our classes. And the last thing is scale. We mean scale in numbers of researchers that are involved, and we also mean scale in the numbers of respondents, okay? And this work, I won't spend a lot of time on the definitional thing, but if you want a literature review and all that, this article in Current Sociology is open access. You can find it with some combination of the search, but if you go to AcademiaSG, which you should do, in the resources section, there is the public policy set of articles, and thanks to Amira's name beginning with an A, we're the first article on that list there. So you can find it there. Okay, so there's some examples of existing research. Let's talk about these guys instead, right? Yeah, I think you know them. So this is what inequality looks like. I'm always indebted to this book because students turn up in my sociology class because they know what sociology class is thanks to this book, right? That's a huge contribution, right? And I think you can give a second round of table thumping to homeless in Singapore, right? Which put homelessness in Singapore on the map of public discussions, just as this is what inequality did for inequality. So within with respect to the Venn diagrams here, right? I drew these out because these are works that I really appreciate, but they don't necessarily belong in the middle of that metric. And they don't have to, right? You can do great work in different areas. And the examples I picked them because the ones that are in there, those are really great pieces of sociology too. I mean, by all means, like go read Nickel and Dimed or Sidewalk by Mitch Jr. So like this is what inequality looks like, is one researcher, right? Over an extended period of time and actually accumulating a lot of interviews. I think it's 120 for the academic book that comes first and then 60 for the popular work that comes next. It's a lot of work, but it's one researcher. So that's not scaled in our definition. But The homeless work, Coco mentioned it earlier, that it was 480 researchers, right? What a massive research team. But it's not participatory in the sense that we're looking at, in that those researchers were mainly data collectors. And I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong on this, but that's my understanding of it, yeah? And again, just to say that these are great pieces of work, and they have a lot in common with what we're trying to do, but I'm offering something a little bit different for your consideration. So I've taught this course many times now, 6 times, and I'll do a 7th in the coming semester. And I'll probably stop after that just because you got to do something different after a while. So there's 20 students in this class, which is a very nice small class, and it's a massive research team, right? Organizing these 20 students and handling all the logistics for them is a big deal. This is not an easy class to teach. It's very intensive. The reference point, basically the only assigned reading, is Empowered Participatory Governance by Arkon Fung and Eric Olin Wright, 2 scholars whom I admire greatly. And they have a bunch of examples which they draw this model from. One is, so participatory budgeting in the city of Porto Alegre in Brazil is a great one. Another one is panchayats in Kerala and the way they enable sort of and incorporate subaltern voices into decision-making processes for the benefit of those communities, right? So you involve people close to the problem. This means both the ones affected by the problem as well as street-level bureaucrats through deliberation, reasoned deliberation as a way of considering what needs to be done. It's different from voting. It's different from strategic negotiation, right? You need to come to it with good faith that we are trying something for the best of all concerned. And secondly, this cannot obtain during situations of domination. If there's a dominant party, then the deliberation fails. And lastly, that it leads to decision-making. Deliberation is not a decision-making mechanism, but it informs decision-making, has to inform state decision-making. So we use this as a frame of reference to study participatory processes that we found in Singapore, present in all kinds of community organizations and the public sector as well. And it was the organizing principle of the class. And this second thing became crucially relevant because it's how things in the class were done. Now, so why did we do all of this? One is, so there's some answers to that which is personal, that I have to teach classes, I'm a faculty member. But I saw the research potential in this, and there's a bit of a backstory. So I had students, my other work, I'm Pakistani by origin, I study governance and development, state processes, and within development, participatory processes are a big deal. So in my other class, we talk about participation in different ways. I had assigned the EPG reading. My students went and took part in a public policy case competition, which they went and won. And their winning proposal for, I think it was aging, support for aging populations in Singapore, involved this kind of community-based, participatory, engaged thing. And even as they won, they were asked by the sort of public sector people who were judging this, are you communists? And this great deal of skepticism on what was done, but they were actually receptive. And I was like, what the heck? People are receptive to these kinds of ideas here in Singapore. I need to find out more about this. And the more I learned about different ways in which the state does its participation in Singapore, for better or for worse, and different ways that community organizations in Singapore do it for better or for worse. There was a lot there that I wanted to get into. And what I really liked was the idea of working with students to help me understand their world, which I was not a native of. And so promoting this kind of civic engagement, I think it's essential to social science education in Singapore, right? It might not be my research interest prior to that, right? But if I want social science to matter in the lives of my students or if the education to be appealing, it has to be relevant to their lives and the world around them. So we get them out to do firsthand research. The field work is student-led. So when they want to go off in random directions, like, Prof, I want to do faith-based organizations. Okay, off you go. One caveat is that I'm not arranging the fieldwork for you. You go and find the ministry or whichever other entity it is. There's a flattened hierarchy. I did not tell them what to do. Right? The first speaker was saying, are you for or against the government? No, I didn't tell them, right? So it's just, I did not answer their questions, which is a fantastic pedagogical device. And it draws back to what Heng Lian said on the first day about the unfinished work. The unfinished work draws others in to complete it. I have to leave it unfinished so that they can go about the process of learning on their terms. That allows them to bring their motivation and their interests to the topic so they can really get engaged. And then this, confronting uncertainty through reasoned deliberation. So one compromise that had to be done was that the work isn't genuinely public, right? In that it's not shared publicly from the students. The final presentation is done behind closed doors. and the student research team is kind of a mini public. So the final presentation has 50 people there. We invite all sorts, civil society, academics, other people that we've worked with, anyone that we've talked to along the way. So it's substantial for an undergraduate student to be speaking to that group of people and defending their positions. That's not trivial, but it's not fully public, and that's kind of important. I have mixed feelings about that. So what did we do? I mean, we did far, far more field work than I could ever accomplish on my own. I'm not running around to 157, 50 field visits per semester. Forget it. It's not happening. But that's the work. That is the data collection that remains. But it's now my task to mobilize that in a proper way so it's published and shared with all of you. We tackled difficult topics. I didn't pick all of them, but it's very interesting. Though, and this gave a particular learning opportunity. And Koki mentioned this, that the data invites you in. The data invites you in. And there was a Malay student who's very interested in the intersection of race and inequality. And so for that class, we had done a survey of SMU students. And so the students we surveyed, we had a couple of sort of demographic questions to place you, your housing type and your racial background, right? So as he's looking, he sees a few people who live in rental housing, okay, great. And he sees a few Malay students, okay, great. And then he realizes that the intersection is empty. And you could almost see the wheels turning in his mind as he comes to the realization that they're not there. They're not at university, right? The pathways that lead them there are too difficult for these individuals to navigate. It's not a representative sample, it's not a definitive statement, but that realization that came to him, I can't replicate that learning despite the fact that you can convey that information in other ways. And it finishes with, we asked them a question in the mandatory feedback at the end of the year, do you feel better committed? They said yes, overwhelmingly so. And I think that's genuine, I think that's true. Okay, so the second study was the Labor Court Research Project. I think there's a lot of parallels between this study and the homeless work. And they looked at migrant salary disputes in Singapore and the evidence of this. And this had a very specific purpose. It's not a pedagogic purpose. This was to demonstrate that, just like Stephanie was talking about yesterday, that the complaints that were being made are not anecdotal, they're not individual, right? You cannot dismiss them, yeah? Here's 150 examples of this same thing happening again and again and again, and you must respect this data, right? And that claim was made, and powerfully so. And so that kind of contribution was done through a massive research team that they had a very complex structure of people supervising each other within the research team. That was really impressive. And that was a key part of producing something that was sufficiently scaled to have the impact that they were hoping for. So why would you do this? So you get to engage directly with public issues, and you get to do so in a way that is really organic, in a way that students can lead, they can shape it according to their interests, and that's really powerful. It's a fantastic way to teach people about qualitative research methods. Qualitative research cannot be learned in the abstract. 1 minute. Yep. And this gets people in depth. My students did 8 fieldwork exercises per semester. That's just quite a lot of fieldwork for them to do and to write up. It's working with limited resources. I escape the need for funding. It's brilliant. I love the freedom that gives. And I like the approach to fieldwork that brings multiple perspectives into the fieldwork. For fun. That's me. I said that. I mean a lot by this. It's not just frivolous, it's not just that. But to be an academic who can do something that means something to me, I cannot just jump through the hoops that are placed in front of me, because there's endless amounts of stuff. You mentioned the tyranny of metrics in the university, right? If that defines what I have to do as academic, just shoot me now, right? So you have to do things that you care about and to make space for them and to chase them, and that's part of it. And I'm so happy I did. But then there are these academic professional priorities. One of our first speakers was Jackie Ho. She will have to navigate all of that as we do. It's very time consuming. This is a painful thing to run. It's rewarding, but it's not easy. And I would say also that there's a danger for the researcher. If you leave it all to the research team, then you don't do it yourself, it's going to lead to bad research. And lastly, this idea of the classroom as a protected space. I feel like it needs to be there, because I don't want to have students producing stuff which is then put out into the wild. I feel like that wouldn't be protecting them in a way. There's a risk to me too, but I don't think I can do that to students I want to prioritize the pedagogy in a way. But that comes with trade-offs. Okay? Thanks so much. That's all from me.